Hi, I'm Ian Suzuki. You might already know me as Scalding Hot Soup on Twitch. I'm a Masters level drafter in Eternal. The goal of this video is to bring new Eternal players up to speed in the draft format. This guide is intended for people that understand the mechanics of the game and have a rough idea of how draft works. If you haven't completed the tutorial, please make sure to do so now. For everyone else, let's begin. First, let's talk about the structure of the Eternal draft format and how it impacts your play experience. The way draft works in most card games is similar to how drafting works in professional sports or fantasy sports. Each player opens a pack and then takes one card out of it. Once done, the player passes that pack to the person next to them. This continues until no cards are left in the pack. Once that happens, a new pack is opened, and the process is repeated, except the cards are passed to a different set of players. Packs 1 and 3 are received from one set of players, but packs 2 and 4 are received from another. There's no relation between these two sets of players. There's also no way to send signals to players you are passing to about what is or isn't open. The goal is to build the best possible deck from the 4 packs that we see in the draft. Let's go over a typical build for a draft deck. An Eternal deck must have a minimum of 45 cards, and for consistency reason, generally, it's recommended to play exactly 45 cards. It's important to stick to some general rules during deck building. Units are what win you the game, and most decks that I've seen have between 18 and 20 of them. There are also between 16 and 19 sigils in the average draft deck. This means that, after adding the lands and the units, there are around 6 to 10 slots for removal, weapons, and card advantage spells. So, the part you're waiting for. What cards should you take? Bombs are the most important category to prioritize. Bombs are cards that immediately threaten to take over or win the game. There are many different kinds of bombs, but they do tend to occur at higher rarities. This means that you usually have to take them early in a pack. Some classic examples include Roland's Honor Guard, Eye of Winter, and Sandstorm Titan. Not all draft decks will have cards like these, but they will almost always improve the quality of a deck. They also don't have to be rare. Fourth Tree Elder is a fantastic bomb that can be found at uncommon. Removal is also important. Every color has removal options, and most removal cards are high picks. Death Strike and Annihilate are probably the best removal spells in draft, but there are lots of other good options like Permafrost, Torch, and Vanquish. Shadow tends to have the best removal, and Time tends to have the worst. Mass removal spells such as Harsh Rule are especially coveted, and often count as bombs in their own right. Remember, a deck doesn't have to have a bomb to be good, but it does have to have removal to be good. Removal is the key to a strong draft deck, since being able to proactively answer your opponent's threats is very important. Beyond these two classes of high priority cards, the pick orders become murkier. Evasive units, and units that generate value, such as Serpent Trainer, tend to be high priority picks. Enabling cards such as Seek Power are also high picks, since they allow you to be more flexible in your drafting and deck building. Cards that are synergistic with your overall game plan are also worth considering. However, it's important to look at a card holistically to determine its overall worth. The same card will have different power levels as a game progresses. For example, as good as Roland's Honor Guard is, if you can't get enough power out to cast her, she's effectively useless in your hand. Conversely, while cards like Oni Ronin and District Infantry can be very powerful in the early game, they do tend to become outclassed in the late game. Cards that are useful at different points in the game have a kind of power on their own. A good example is Pyronite, an aggressive 1-drop that can massively upgrade itself when you reach 6 power. Xenon Guardian fills a similar niche. What I'm getting at here is the concept of a power curve. You need to be doing things at every stage of the game. Most draft decks end up being a balanced mix of early aggression and mid to late game beef. I'd guess that the average power curve looks something like 0 to 5 1-drops, 4 to 7 2-drops, 4 to 7 3-drops, 2 to 5 4-drops, 1 to 5 5-drops, and 0 to 3 6 or greater drops. The average deck does not want to overload on early aggression, since 1-drops tend to get outclassed in the late game. It's also foolish to over-prioritize expensive cards, since they are uncastable for the first turns of the game. This means that, sometimes, if you're lucky and already have 3 high-cost bombs in your deck, you'll take a solid removal spell over a bomb. This typically happens later on in a draft, but it's something to think about. Please note that these are just guidelines. There are plenty of aggressive decks out there that want more than 5 1-drops, and will run fewer sigils and less expensive bombs as a result. Combat tricks also go up in value for those decks. There are also some more controlling decks that bide their time until the late game. However, the goal of this video is to teach people how to draft a typical, good draft deck. Highly specialized decks are comparatively rare and situational depending on the cards you see. We might cover those types of decks in a separate video. Last, but certainly not least, we do need to talk about signals. Signals in draft are ways to know what is open or not being drafted by the players that are passing you packs. Seeing an Annihilate third pick is a pretty good signal that Shadow's open. Seeing a second pick Harsh Rule is also a good signal that Justice is open. However, the examples I gave are, well, pretty obvious. It also gets harder to read signals once you already have a couple great cards in your inventory. I'll certainly make some videos for reading signals, but here are a few major tips. First, don't get married to your first pick. If you get overly attached to the first card you take, you have a strong chance of running your draft off the rails. Remember that there are 47 other packs to choose from, and there's a very good chance that there are at least a few people taking cards of the same color as yours. If you are passing great cards in Feln just because you picked an awesome legendary in Rakano, you're probably going to have a bad draft. 2. Remember that each pack is just one data point. If you get past a great removal spell in Shadow, that does not necessarily mean that Shadow is open. Maybe there was a bomb in Shadow and the person passing to you is solidly in that color. It's hard to know for sure. Getting a second pick Annihilate means that it's likely Shadow isn't being drafted by the person to your right, but that's not guaranteed. 3. Try to stay open as long as you can. Remember, packs 2 and 4 are being passed to you by different players. If you commit super hard to Feln in pack 1, but Elysian is really open in pack 2, you might have trouble building a good deck. 3-color decks are very viable if you pick up enough fixing, but there's a lot of merit to being in just one primary color at the end of the first pack, and then to figure out what secondary color is open in the second pack. This is a complex topic, and we'll cover it more in future videos. 4. Try to take the strongest card out of each pack. For the first pack, try to take the strongest card you see. This is especially true for the first 4 to 5 picks. Since each pack is just one data point, if you take the best card out of each pack and you set the color of your first pick aside as a secondary concern, you're probably going to be able to identify which colors will be open to you in pack 3. This is also true to a lesser extent in the second pack. Later on, you'll primarily be taking the best card in your colors, but this is a good way to start. 5. Don't forget your curve and removal to unit ratio. This is mostly a concern for later in the draft, but you need to have both removal and good creatures. Try to balance the two as you move through the draft. It's also important to remember your power curve and to make sure you aren't drafting too many expensive creatures or too many cheap creatures. There are a wealth of resources out there to help you get better at drafting. Draft tier lists can be a good way to get a rough understanding of what is good or bad in a format. RNGEternal.com has a draft pick order that is helpful to get a general idea of what is good or bad, and while I wouldn't endorse it as the end-all be-all of where cards stand, it is a good place to start learning. You can also check out my stream on Twitch. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have there. There are a wealth of other great streamers for Eternal on Twitch, so definitely check out the Eternal stream directory. That's going to conclude this guide. I think I've covered the broad strokes of how to draft a good deck. Later videos will cover more advanced subtopics in card evaluation, deck building, reading signals, and actually playing the game. Hopefully, this has been helpful for you. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any feedback, also, please leave it in the comments below. This is my first video for YouTube that involved video editing, so I know I still have a lot to learn. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.